could we soon be forced to pay a new tax to help aged care and fund aged care in this country? The minister responsible for the sector, Annika Wells, was at the press club yesterday and she declared the government wants to keep, quote, as many options open as possible in reforming the way aged care is funded, with a 1% Medicare-style flat rate levy on income tax floated as one of the possibilities. Joining me now is National Seniors Chief Advocate Ian Henschke. Great to catch up with you again, Ian. What do you think of this idea? Do we need a new tax?
Well, we had a Royal Commission and the Royal Commission was asked, how do we fund better aged care? We had two Royal Commissioners who looked at it for 2 years. At the end, they handed down their findings and Linnell Briggs, who was one of those Royal Commissioners, said a 1% Medicare levy. Mr Pagoni, extremely brilliant mind, he said a 1% hypothecated levy from income tax that would be dedicated to aged care. So they've given you the answer. Why do you hold a Royal Commission unless you actually follow through on the recommendations? 148 recommendations. Both sides of politics seem to agree on that. So I think the Royal Commissioners have actually laid out the way forward. Now we have a aged care task force council that has to look at it again.
Look, you know, I'm a great advocate for aged care, elderly Australians. You and I have talked a million times about this, but don't we pay taxes already that should cover what's going on in aged care? Why do we need to pay more? I mean, I could think of a million things we spend taxpayer dollars on that aren't good that we could divert into aged care.
Well, look, you're right. I mean, but you're not the Treasurer and I'm not the Treasurer. But what they do know is that we've got 5.8 million baby boomers. We know how old they are. We have a Australian government actuary. We have a Bureau of Statistics. We have a Treasury Department, so they can see what's happening. And the noted demographer, Bernard Salk, the other day, called it an aged care freight train coming towards us. Now, Steve, you and I are right in the middle of the baby boom. You know, we're right there. You know, we're mid-50s kids or whatever. My brother is at the start of the baby boom. He's now 77 years of age this year. He will start to need aged care according to the averages around the time that he's about 81 or something like that. So you can basically say this group of people is going to be coming through the system. We've known that ever since the baby boom happened. That's why we built kindergartens, childcare centres, we built primary schools, we built high schools, we built universities, we had training colleges for apprentices, all of that in the 1960s and 70s. So we know we had to deal with that then. So now we deal with the ageing part of it. But Steve, the thing that I think people have to remember is that people are staying in their own homes. And in the last budget, there was a $2.2 billion saving announced, and you can look at it in the budget papers, because people are staying in their own homes. So I think we need to actually remember that what we're seeing now is a group of people going into aged care later and later, frailer and frailer. And so we should see that as, I would imagine, part of the hospital system, because aged care homes are becoming more like hospitals, more like hospices. Mr Albanese said he wants to put a nurse in every aged care home because they are nursing homes and they need nurses. So you're absolutely right. It's what you choose to decide to do as a society. And I think we should look after our older Australians and give them the same sort of care that they would get in a hospital, because otherwise they will move them out of the aged care home and move them into the hospital, and you have to pay for it through the hospital system.
Yeah, look, I've got a perfect example. My mother's 87, soon to turn 88, lives at home in her own home, but at some point she's going to have to move, as you say, into perhaps that sort of facility. But talking about home care, and what about Australians having an honest conversation about more of their children looking after their elderly parents and having them in their homes and looking after them themselves? I've just dobbed myself in, haven't I? I know what's going to happen to me in a couple of years now.
Yeah, I know, but where does your mum live? You see, this is the problem. Australians now move around the country. They move around the world. They move to different places. I came home to South Australia, where I am talking to you now, when my mother needed care, and myself, and I had one brother and another brother who were able to provide that care. So, you know, we were able to do that. You look at families today, they might have one or two children, and often those children are scattered to the four winds. So it's not the same world as it was. In the 1950s, those baby boomers they were part of families that had up to 10 kids, 12 kids. I mean, I went to school with people that had 12, people in the family. Mum and Dad made 14. I mean, this, I can tell you, Steve, you had enough people around. And I know of a woman who's 105 years of age, and she has got her children looking after her because she came from she was part of a very big family. You've got people now that have come from overseas, often on their own. They're not necessarily connected with that. So we've got to face up to the reality. It's going to be different, but you then have to say to yourself, how do we fund it? I think the Royal Commissioners gave us a pretty good example of how they can do it, and I think we should be looking at the Royal Commission again and saying, well, why did we spend 2 years paying for two brilliant minds? We had two Royal Commissioners, remember, not one. Mr Pagani and Linnell Briggs, and they're both brilliant minds, and they put their mind to it. They got the best advice, and they said, this is what you should be looking at, a Medicare levy. And if the younger generation's going to say, look, this is... Yeah, I mean, if the younger generation's going to say, well, look, we object to this, just remind them that if they're 25 now, in 60 years' time, they're going to be old, and they will need care as well. So it's about society and community. We shouldn't be pitting one generation against another.
I hear you, and I guess my mother's packing her bag as we speak. Ian Henschke, always a pleasure to catch up with you. Thank you very much, mate.